What's one family saying or phrase you heard growing up that still sticks with you?
I was sitting in the dimly lit living room of my sister's modest ranch-style home on the outskirts of Chicago, the kind of place where the walls echoed with the laughter of family gatherings that had grown rarer over the years since Dad's passing. Cradling my 3-year-old niece Lily in my arms as she nestled against my chest with her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched tightly in her small hands, her eyelids fluttering shut after a day filled with playground adventures and the simple joys of childhood that seemed so distant from the adult complications swirling around us, when my phone vibrated insistently on the coffee table beside me, pulling me from that peaceful moment into a storm of revelations that would upend everything I thought I knew about loyalty and trust within our fractured family. The message from Mom, Evelyn, flashed across the screen in bold letters that carried the weight of betrayal wrapped in casual cruelty, reading simply, "We're in Madrid. Emptied the account before you could," followed by those mocking emojis she loved to use as if turning financial sabotage into a lighthearted joke could erase the years of quiet resentment I'd harbored over her endless excuses for dipping into the inheritance Dad had so carefully set aside for all of us after his heart gave out during that routine checkup 8 years ago, a fund meant to secure our futures through college tuitions and home down payments, but which she'd treated like her personal escape hatch from the mundane life of a widowed schoolteacher in the Midwest. A grin spread across my face despite the sharp pang of anger twisting in my gut, because in that instant I realized how perfectly my preparations had aligned with her predictable greed. Having spent the last several months meticulously reviewing the old bank statements I'd discovered hidden in Dad's attic office during a spring cleaning session that unearthed boxes of yellowed documents revealing patterns of withdrawals disguised as family support that actually funded her whirlwind romance and marriage to Rick, that smooth-talking real estate flipper from downstate who swept in with tales of exotic getaways and investment opportunities right when she was most vulnerable. "You mean your old account?" I typed back with fingers steady from the thrill of anticipation, knowing full well that I'd already initiated the transfer of the primary trust assets into a newly established account under my sole oversight just 2 weeks prior. Leveraging the durable power of attorney Dad had granted me in his final lucid moments as a safeguard against exactly this kind of familial opportunism, a legal maneuver facilitated by our longtime family attorney who nodded knowingly when I explained the suspicious activity without needing to delve into the painful details of how Evelyn's priorities had shifted so dramatically after Dad's death. Lily shifted slightly in my lap, her warm breath against my neck serving as a grounding force amid the rising tide of emotions, reminding me that this little girl, with her wide, curious eyes and unfiltered affection, represented the innocence I was fighting to preserve from the corrosive influence of adult betrayals that had already strained relationships with my brother Tom and sister Jenna, who were both navigating their own battles. Tom with his struggling auto repair shop in the suburbs, and Jenna with the relentless demands of nursing shifts and single parenthood after her own divorce. As I gently rocked Lily back to sleep, my mind raced through the sequence of events that led to this confrontation, recalling the late nights poring over financial logs on my laptop in my cramped one-bedroom apartment overlooking the bustling Loop, where the hum of the city below mirrored the constant buzz of worry about how to protect what remained of Dad's legacy without alienating the very family it was intended for, and I couldn't suppress a wry chuckle at the irony of it all, imagining Evelyn and Rick toasting with sangria in some sun-drenched plaza, blissfully unaware that their access to the funds had been severed like a lifeline cut in a storm. Thanks to the automated alerts I'd programmed through the bank's secure portal that would notify me of any further attempts, while simultaneously locking down secondary cards they might try to fall back on. The satisfaction of that preemptive strike coursed through me like a shot of adrenaline, a clever form of revenge born from years of biting my tongue during holiday dinners where Mom would regale us with stories of her adventures funded by what she called shared resources, all while Tom nodded along in denial and Jenna changed the subject to avoid the tension. But now, with Lily's peaceful form in my arms, I felt the weight of responsibility pressing down, questioning whether my secretive actions would ultimately heal or further divide us, especially since I'd chosen not to loop in my siblings yet, fearing their Divided loyalties might complicate the cleanup. That internal debate swirled as I laid Lily down in her toddler bed adorned with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, a touch Jenna had added to make the room feel like a safe haven, and stepped into the hallway where the cool evening air from an open window carried the faint scent of autumn leaves from the neighborhood yards, only for my phone to ring sharply with Tom's caller ID illuminating the screen, his voice message crackling through the speaker with urgency as he demanded to know what I'd done to the family account after receiving a vague alert from the bank that hinted at irregularities, leaving me standing there in the shadows with my heart hammering against my ribs. The first threads of the unraveling beginning to pull tighter around us all and forcing me to confront the immediate fallout of a plan that was only just starting to unfold in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. Tom's voice message played on a loop in my head as I slipped out of my sister's house into the crisp Chicago night, the streetlights casting long shadows on the cracked sidewalks of our old neighborhood, where kids still rode bikes until dusk despite the cooling autumn air. Driving back to my apartment with the radio tuned low to some classic rock station that droned on about lost loves and second chances in a way that felt all too fitting for the tangled web of deceptions I'd been unraveling. For months now, ever since that rainy afternoon when I decided to dig deeper into the family finances after noticing discrepancies in the monthly statements that arrived like clockwork in Dad's old mahogany desk drawer. The message had accused me of tampering without knowing the half of it, his tone a mix of confusion and defensiveness that stemmed from years of turning a blind eye to Mom's spending habits, because confronting her meant admitting the woman who'd raised us wasn't the pillar of strength we remembered from our childhood road trips across the Midwest to visit relatives in Wisconsin, but rather someone who'd morphed into a thrill-seeker alongside Rick. That opportunistic charmer with his perpetual 5 o'clock shadow and stories of flipping houses for quick profits that always seemed to evaporate before benefiting anyone but himself. I pulled into my parking spot under the L tracks, the rumble of an incoming train vibrating through the steering wheel as I grabbed my laptop bag and headed upstairs, the weight of secrecy pressing on me like the humid summers we used to endure without air conditioning, because while Tom's loyalty to Evelyn blinded him to the red flags, I couldn't shake the dilemma of whether to pull Jenna into this mess right away, knowing her exhaustion from double shifts at the hospital and raising Lily alone would make any added stress feel like one burden too many, yet withholding the truth felt like hoarding ammunition in a family war that was already claiming casualties. Settling at my kitchen table cluttered with takeout containers from the Thai place down the block, I fired up the banking portal and initiated the next layer of my plan. A subtle rerouting of any credit alerts tied to their secondary cards that would funnel notifications straight to my inbox, disguised as routine updates. A clever bit of digital sleight of hand I'd learned from online forums during my divorce when I had to safeguard my own assets from an ex who thought alimony was optional, and as the confirmation popped up with a soft chime, I allowed myself a quiet laugh at the thought of Rick scratching his head over a declined charge for paella or whatever overpriced meal they were indulging in, oblivious to how I'd turned their escape into a slow-motion trap without lifting a finger beyond a few keystrokes. The humor in it all bubbled up wryly, imagining Evelyn's dramatic flair turning a simple billing error into a full-blown crisis abroad, the kind of light vulgarity in my mind labeling Rick as the leech who'd latched onto her widow's grief with promises of excitement that masked his eye for easy marks, but beneath that satisfaction lurked the growing conflict of uncertainty. As delving into the shadows of our family vault revealed more clues than I'd bargained for, like those scanned copies of old checks I'd archived from Dad's files showing transfers to an account in Rick's name dated just months after the funeral, hinting at a premeditated alliance that made my preemptive account shift feel less like revenge and more like desperate self-defense against a betrayal that had roots deeper than I'd suspected. Memories flooded in unbidden of those tense Thanksgivings where Mom would deflect questions about the dwindling trust balance with tales of necessary investments in Rick's latest venture, a condo development in Florida that never materialized, while Tom defended her with excuses about Dad's outdated planning and Jenna focused on passing the mashed potatoes to avoid the undercurrent of resentment, leaving me as the quiet observer who now held the strings, though the emotional toll gnawed at me as I considered the cost of my choices. Wondering if keeping this from my siblings made me the guardian they needed or just another secretive player in the game Evelyn had started. The night wore on with me cross-referencing dates against calendar entries from my phone, piecing together a timeline of withdrawals that aligned suspiciously with their anniversaries and trips. Each discovery building the case for why I'd acted alone without consulting the family lawyer yet, fearing his involvement might accelerate the fallout before I could secure everything, and just as fatigue began to blur the screen. My email inbox refreshed with an unexpected ping from an automated travel service, a hotel confirmation in Madrid addressed to Evelyn under the alias E. Harlan that detailed a lavish suite checkout scheduled for the following morning, complete with spa credits and a chauffeured transfer to the airport that suddenly made my blood run cold with the realization that they weren't just vacationing, but executing a hasty exit strategy. Leaving me staring at the glowing screen in the dim light of my apartment, heart racing as the pieces of their plan snapped into sharper focus and propelled me toward the next inevitable confrontation. That unexpected hotel confirmation email glowed on my laptop screen like a beacon in the fog of midnight worries as I leaned back in my creaky desk chair, the distant wail of a siren cutting through the quiet streets of Chicago to underscore the urgency building in my chest. Because confirming Evelyn and Rick's location in Madrid under a pseudonym wasn't just a lucky break, but a tangible thread in the chase that had me firing up tracking software I'd subscribed to for professional reasons. During my days advising clients on asset protection, tools that now served a far more personal purpose in monitoring their digital footprints across international borders without alerting anyone to my involvement. The details in the email painted a picture of indulgence gone awry, listing amenities like rooftop pools and private tours that screamed of funds they no longer had full access to. And with a few clicks I layered on the next phase of my revenge by initiating a temporary hold on their linked emergency credit line through the bank's fraud prevention system, a witty maneuver disguised as routine security checks that would decline any large transactions while sending them generic notices about suspicious activity abroad, leaving them to stew in confusion as their plans unraveled thread by thread in a foreign city where language barriers only amplified the frustration I imagined Rick venting through gritted teeth. A soft chuckle escaped me at the mental image of him haggling with a concierge over euros he couldn't access. The light vulgarity of picturing his slick persona cracking under the pressure of bounced payments, turning what could have been a glamorous getaway into a comedy of errors. Yet beneath that humor simmered the deepening uncertainty of how my actions might ripple back home, especially as the clock ticked toward morning and I wrestled with the dilemma of looping in our family lawyer for international advice or handling this solo to maintain control, knowing that external involvement could either solidify my position or expose vulnerabilities like the outdated passport I hadn't renewed since my last solo trip to New York years ago. Dawn broke with me bleary-eyed but determined, driving through the early rush-hour traffic to Jenna's house, where Lily waited with her morning routine of cereal bowls and cartoon marathons. The little girl's enthusiastic hug upon seeing me a bomb against the isolation of my secretive crusade, though her innocent questions during breakfast about why Grandma's pictures on my phone showed sunny streets far away pierced the armor I'd built around my resolve, making me falter as I spun a tale of a surprise vacation without mentioning the darker undercurrents of theft and retribution that had prompted it. Spending the day with Lily at the local park, pushing her on swings while fielding updates from my monitoring apps that showed escalating attempts to withdraw cash from ATMs in Madrid's bustling districts, each denial a small victory in my digital pursuit that felt both empowering and recklessly isolating, because while the clever blocks on their emergency funds ensured they couldn't bolt without consequence, the emotional weight of withholding this from Jenna, who confided in me over lunch about her own financial strains from unexpected car repairs, left me grappling with choices that positioned me as the unyielding protector yet risked painting me as the one hoarding family secrets for personal gain. A role that had the potential to breed resentment if the full story ever surfaced during one of our obligatory sibling check-ins. Subtle clues continued to emerge in the data streams, like geolocation pings tying their movements to high-end shopping areas followed by frantic searches for wire transfer services, hinting at a backup stash Evelyn might have hidden beyond the trust. Perhaps in one of those offshore accounts Rick boasted about during family barbecues as smart planning while Dad's eyes narrowed in quiet disapproval, and as the afternoon sun dipped low, casting golden hues over the playground where Lily chased pigeons with unrestrained glee, I felt the growing conflict intensify with every vibration of my phone alerting to another failed transaction. The satisfaction of my revenge tempered by the nagging fear that this chase across the Atlantic was drawing me into waters too deep for a Midwestern woman used to balancing checkbooks rather than international intrigue. Evening settled in with me tucking Lily into bed after a story about adventurous explorers who always found their way home. Her sleepy assurance that I was her favorite aunt warming me even as guilt twisted for the lies by omission that shielded her from the storm, and just as I stepped into the living room to review the latest reports, a push notification from a news aggregator caught my eye with a breaking story about an American couple causing a disturbance at a luxury hotel in central Madrid over an unpaid bill that had spiraled into threats of police involvement, the vague description of the woman's silver-streaked hair and the man's flustered gestures matching Evelyn and Rick too closely to be coincidence, leaving me frozen with the remote in hand as the broadcast teased more details in the next hour, my mind reeling from the brink of their attempted checkout denial that promised to either trap them in place or force a desperate countermove straight back to the heart of our families. Unraveling legacy. The breaking news alert about the hotel disturbance in Madrid lingered on my TV screen like an unwelcome guest refusing to leave as I muted the volume and sank deeper into the couch cushions of Jenna's living room. The flickering images of flashing police lights outside a grand European facade sending a jolt through me that confirmed Evelyn and Rick were not just delayed, but cornered in their own web of extravagance, their attempted checkout unraveling into a public spectacle that had the potential to drag our family's dirty laundry across international headlines if any enterprising reporter connected the dots back to the Jenkins name from suburban Illinois. With Lily finally asleep upstairs after her evening bath routine that involved bubbles and songs about faraway places, I pulled out my phone to intercept the latest flurry of messages between them that my monitoring setup had captured through a shared cloud account Rick carelessly left open during one of his business logins years ago, the texts painting a vivid portrait of panic with Evelyn demanding he sweet-talk the manager while he fired off pleas to old contacts for quick loans that bounced as quickly as their hotel payment had. Each exchange a testament to the crumbling facade of their charmed life built on pilfered foundations that now threatened to bury them under the weight of unpaid tabs and mounting fees. A wry smile tugged at my lips amid the tension, the humor arising from the sheer absurdity of Rick's flailing attempts to play the suave negotiator abroad when back home he could barely haggle over a car wash. His light vulgarity in my thoughts labeling him as the ultimate freeloader who'd hitched his wagon to Mom's grief-stricken generosity with tales of perpetual sunshine and easy money, turning what should have been our safety net into a parachute for their endless escapes while the rest of us patched roofs and paid braces for kids like Lily. The satisfaction of my orchestrated blocks deepened as I remotely escalated the lockdown on their remaining assets, seeding a false trail of refund promises through an anonymous app that looped them into endless verification calls with a virtual assistant programmed to delay and deflect. A clever revenge that kept them tethered to the hotel lobby arguing with staff who grew increasingly impatient with the American duo's excuses, yet the growing conflict clawed at me as Jenna wandered in from the kitchen with a mug of herbal tea, her eyes heavy from another long shift and oblivious to the storm I'd been navigating alone, prompting a dilemma that had me debating whether to book a red-eye flight to Madrid myself to confront them in person or let the local authorities handle the mess that might expose more than just their finances. Knowing that jetting across the ocean on a whim would mean leaving Lily and abandoning my responsibilities here, a choice that felt recklessly impulsive even as the urge for direct payback burned hotter with every intercepted rant from Evelyn about how ungrateful we all were for Dad's miserly provisions. Uncertainty wrapped around those thoughts like the fog rolling off Lake Michigan on chilly mornings, amplified by subtle clues in their messages referencing a safety deposit key back in Chicago that hinted at hidden compartments in Dad's old bank box where they might have stashed documents or cash beyond my reach. Revelations that made my preemptive move seem incomplete and forced me to question if this breaking point was mine as much as theirs, especially since withholding the full scope from Tom and Jenna positioned me as the gatekeeper hoarding power in a way that could shatter trust irreparably if they learned I'd been playing puppet master without a family vote. The evening stretched into a haze of pacing and planning, my mind replaying childhood memories of Evelyn as the fun mom organizing picnics by the river where she'd dote on us with homemade lemonade before the shadows of loss. And Rick's influence dimmed that light, leaving me to grapple with the emotional toll of turning her world upside down when part of me still yearned for the reconciliation that seemed further away with each denied transaction alert pinging my phone. And just as I was steeling myself to draft an email tipping off the hotel with irrefutable proof of their fraud to push the confrontation over the edge, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from an international number that I knew instinctively was Evelyn's, her voice breaking through the line in a torrent of sobs and accusations that culminated in a desperate plea revealing a long-buried family secret about Dad's will involving a contested clause that could upend everything I'd fought to protect, leaving me gripping the receiver with white knuckles as the line crackled with her raw vulnerability and the promise of truths that threatened to red. Evelyn's voice trembled through the international connection, like a ghost from our past refusing to stay buried. Her sobs intermingling with fragmented confessions that peeled back layers of deception I'd only glimpsed in the shadows of old documents and whispered family rumors, revealing a contested codicil in Dad's will that apparently granted Rick a share of the trust under conditions tied to marital harmony, which she claimed had been forged in the haze of her grief shortly after his death. A bombshell that made my grip on the phone tighten as I paced Jenna's dimly lit kitchen with the scent of cooling dinner lingering in the air, forcing me to process how this secret clause could retroactively legitimize some of their withdrawals and potentially undermine the very foundations of my revenge by casting doubt on the assets I'd locked down in a desperate bid to safeguard what remained for Tom, Jenna, Lily, and myself. The revelation hit like a Midwest blizzard, sudden and disorienting, because while I'd anticipated greed and opportunism from Rick's side, the idea that Evelyn had actively altered Dad's intentions through shady legal maneuvers painted her not just as a victim of bad choices, but as an active architect of the family's slow financial erosion. A twist that intertwined all the subtle clues I'd gathered, from the suspicious notary stamps on archived forms to the cryptic references in their texts about a backup inheritance, into a narrative far more insidious than simple theft, leaving me reeling with the dilemma of whether to demand proof over the line or hang up and verify through our lawyer, knowing that engaging further might give her the emotional leverage to spin this into a tale of maternal sacrifice that could sway Tom and Jenna against me if word got out. A bitter humor surfaced in the midst of the chaos, my mind flashing to the irony of Rick, that perpetual sidekick with his get-rich schemes and empty charm, suddenly positioned as a quasi-beneficiary in a document Dad would have torn up on sight, the light vulgarity of it all making me inwardly scoff at how he leached onto not just her heart, but our legacy like a barnacle on a sinking ship. Yet the growing uncertainty clawed deeper as Evelyn pleaded for a wire transfer to cover the hotel debacle and buy time for explanations. Her vulnerability cracking the armor of my resolve and stirring a flicker of pity that warred with the satisfaction of watching their Madrid misadventure escalate through live updates on my second screen, where reports detailed police arriving at the scene to mediate the unpaid bill standoff that had drawn a small crowd of curious tourists. With the call still echoing in my ears, I escalated my final act of retribution by triggering a comprehensive account freeze through the bank's international protocol, coordinating with my contact there to flag the situation as potential elder fraud without naming names outright. A clever culmination of my digital arsenal that not only halted any remaining outflows, but alerted authorities on both sides of the Atlantic to investigate the codicil's authenticity. Imagining Evelyn and Rick in that opulent lobby reduced to haggling over room service tabs while officials pored over their passports and cards, their faces a mask of feigned innocence that masked years of calculated drains on our shared history. The emotional core twisted painfully as Jenna stirred from her nap in the next room, calling out softly for a glass of water that pulled me back to the present and reminded me of the human cost beyond the numbers, because my choices, operating in secrecy, withholding the escalating drama from my siblings, and now potentially exposing Evelyn to legal scrutiny abroad, positioned me as the ruthless enforcer in a story where the audience might cheer my wit yet recoil at the isolation I'd imposed on us all. Dilemmas that peaked when Tom's text lit up my phone asking for an update on the account glitch, with a tone laced with suspicion that hinted he was piecing together more than I'd shared, forcing me to craft a vague reassurance that bought time but deepened the rift I feared would define our relationships long after this blew over. As the night deepened with news feeds updating the Madrid incident to show the couple being escorted to a holding area pending verification of their story, the pieces of the puzzle aligned in a partial revelation that tied Rick's influence to the will's alterations through dated emails I'd just uncovered in a deeper archive search, confirming Evelyn's complicity without absolving her entirely and leaving ambiguities about whether Dad had suspected foul play or if this was all a posthumous betrayal born of her loneliness, a thought-provoking void that had me staring out the window at the starry suburban sky wondering if my revenge had restored balance or merely shifted the burdens onto shoulders like Jenna's and Lily's who deserved untainted futures. The climax unfolded in fragmented reports of their detention, Evelyn's earlier plea hanging unanswered as I chose silence over confrontation. The hotel chaos serving as a fitting denouement to their spree yet opening doors to unanswered questions about the codicil's fate, potential lawsuits back home, and whether family ties could mend after such fractures, leaving me with a weary sense of unfinished business that lingered like the aftertaste of a long-fought victory, pondering if justice in family matters ever truly arrives or if it simply evolves into new forms of uncertainty stretching into the horizon of our lives.